Okay, so have you ever been in that situation? You're talking maybe with friends, maybe it's work, and you've got this like strong opinion brewing, or maybe you just need to gently disagree with something someone said.
Oh, definitely.
And then you go to say it in English and the words just, I don't know, they feel a bit clumsy. Like you keep defaulting to, I think, I think, I think.
Right. Or you want to show you really, really agree, and all that comes out is a flat little yes.
Exactly. It's like you had this whole complex idea, this feeling inside, but getting it out in English in a way that sounds natural and, well, it's tough.
It really is. It's such a common challenge for English learners. You've got all this nuance inside, right? Your own unique take on things, strong beliefs sometimes.
Yeah.
But the language tools you feel comfortable using might seem, well, a bit basic. Like you're trying to paint this amazing picture, but you only got like 3 colors.
That's a great way to put it. You know what I mean? The feeling behind it. But translating it, especially when you need to agree or disagree smoothly, it feels like a hurdle. And that, listener, is exactly what we're diving into today. This is our mission for this deep dive, to get you way beyond those few phrases you might be stuck on.
Yeah, to give you more tools.
Exactly. We want to give you this richer palette of expressions.
Right.
So you can say what you mean, agree properly, disagree politely, and just sound more fluent, more natural, more like you.
And we've been digging into some really helpful material for this, basically a guide designed specifically to help learners like you tackle this exact problem.
Okay.
And it's not just about, memorizing lists. It really gets into why having different ways to say these things matters. It's not just sounding fancy, right?
Right.
It's about being precise, sounding authentic, and honestly just handling the social side of conversations better. Because sticking to just 1 or 2 phrases, well, sometimes it can sound a bit blunt or repetitive.
Or just not quite natural, yeah.
Exactly. It can get in the way of actually connecting with people.
Okay, let's unpack this then. We're going to dive right into the nitty-gritty, the actual words and phrases you can use to really upgrade how you share your thoughts and interact. First things first, giving your opinion. How do we do that confidently, but also, with a bit of finesse?
Right. This is fundamental, isn't it? Like you said, everyone knows I think. And look, I think is fine. It's totally normal. Native speakers use it all the time.
Sure.
But the source material we looked at really highlights how having alternatives lets you show subtle differences, like how strong your opinion is or where it's coming from or even how formal you want to be.
Ah, okay. So it's about choosing the right tool for the job, basically.
Precisely. It's like having a whole toolkit instead of just one screwdriver. You can handle different situations much better.
Makes sense. So we want to move beyond just I think. What are some of these other tools? What does the guide suggest we add to our repertoire?
Yeah, it gives a really practical list of common, useful phrases. Things like, in my opinion.
Okay, classic.
Personally, I believe. From my perspective.
Yeah.
I'd say that.
More casual.
Yeah, a bit. And also, as far as I'm concerned.
Okay, that's a good list to start with. Let's really spend some time digging into these, though, because just knowing the phrases isn't quite enough, is it? It's about the nuance. Like, what's the actual difference in feeling between, in my opinion, and personally, I believe?
Well, how does picking one change how people hear you?
That's exactly the right question. These little introductory phrases, they act like signposts for your listener, don't they? They set expectations.
How so?
Well, take in my opinion. It's probably the most straightforward, universally understood one. It clearly flags what's coming next as your subjective view, not, a hard fact.
Right. Keeps it subjective.
Yeah. It works pretty much anywhere. Casual chat, more formal meeting. It just puts a little boundary around your statement saying, this is my take. Someone asks, what about the team picnic? Saying, in my opinion, we should go to the park. Makes it clear it's just your suggestion.
Seems like a safe bet. Reliable. Totally. Now, personally, I believe adds a layer, doesn't it? That word personally really highlights that it's your individual view, maybe different from others, and believe. Well, believe often sounds a bit stronger, more considered than just think.
Ah, okay. So personally makes it more individual, and believe adds conviction.
That's a great way to put it. Personally, I believe signals this is something you've probably thought about, maybe something you feel quite strongly about.
So if we were talking about, say, the value of reading books.
Right. You could say, in my opinion, reading is important. Fine. But if you feel really passionate, maybe because reading changed your life, you'd more likely say, personally, I believe reading is absolutely essential for broadening your horizons. See the difference in intensity?
Yeah, I definitely hear that. One's a statement, the other feels more like a conviction.
Huh.
Okay, that makes sense. What about from my perspective?
From my perspective, is really useful when you're talking about something that, has multiple sides to it, or where personal experience really shapes your view.
Yeah.
It explicitly says, look, this is how I see it, based on my unique viewpoint or my experience. It acknowledges that other views might exist, but clearly states yours.
So like in a project meeting, if things are going wrong, someone could say, from my perspective, the biggest hurdle has been the software, because I'm the one using it every day and seeing the glitches.
Perfect example. It ties the opinion directly to their specific role or experience. Or that social media example from the source, saying, from my perspective, social media has pros and cons, implies that it's your observation, your experience with social media that led you to see both sides.
Right. You could even add to it like, from my perspective, cons. I've seen friends get really stressed by it, but then again, I've also found amazing online communities through it.
Exactly. It shows the basis for your perspective. It feels more considered, more reflective than just a flat statement.
Yeah, it adds a nice layer of thoughtfulness.
Yeah.
Okay, what about, I'd say that. You mentioned it was maybe more casual.
Yeah, generally a bit more casual, a bit softer than, in my opinion, or especially personally, I'd say. Often introduces an opinion that feels less like a deep-seated belief and more like maybe a conclusion based on what you see, or a prediction, or just a gentler way to put forward your view.
Feels very conversational, like something you just drop into a chat naturally.
Totally. Like you look out the window and say, looks cloudy, I'd say it's going to rain later. Or you tried a new cafe, I'd say that place is pretty decent. Not amazing, but good.
Right. It's your take, but presented fairly lightly.
Exactly. So in that remote work example, I'd say remote work is a great option. Just sounds a bit more understated, less forceful than, personally, I believe remote work is fantastic.
So less about strong conviction, more about just adding your viewpoint to the conversation flow.
That's a good way to think about it. And then the last one on that initial list, as far as I'm concerned.
Okay, this one feels potentially a bit stronger, or maybe more specific.
It can be, as far as I'm concerned, often signals that the opinion you're giving is really rooted in your own needs, your interests, or how the situation affects you personally.
Right.
It implies that, okay, other people might see it differently or have different priorities, but for you, or from where you're standing, this is the important thing, it can sometimes narrow the focus to your frame of reference.
Now that's interesting. Does it ever risk sounding a bit dismissive? Like, as far as I'm concerned, this is how it is, and I don't care about other views.
That's a really sharp point. And yes, it can lean that way if you're not careful with tone and context. Used poorly, it could sound self-centered.
Yeah.
However, used, well, it's just clarifying the basis of your opinion. Like, maybe your team is choosing new software. If your job involves dealing with customers all day, you might say, well, as far as I'm concerned, the #1 priority is ease of use for the customer interface, because that impacts my daily work directly.
I see. You're not saying other things like, say, cost or security don't matter at all, but you're highlighting what matters most from your specific role or concern.
Exactly. You're stating your priority based on your involvement. And that remote work example from the source nails this. As far as I'm concerned, it's a great option, but it depends on the person's job and lifestyle.
Right. That bud is doing a lot of work there.
It really is. As far as I'm concerned, sets it up as your personal positive view, maybe based on your own good experience, but adding the "it depends" part immediately shows you recognize it's not universal. You're saying, for me, it's good, but I get that it's not for everyone. Without that nuance, it could sound like a very narrow, potentially selfish viewpoint.
Okay, wow. So these phrases aren't just synonyms for I think. They really offer this kind of sliding scale for presenting your opinion from the standard, in my opinion, to the personally convicted, personally, I believe, the observation-based from my perspective, the casual, I'd say, or the self-focused as far as I'm concerned.
You've got it. The key is consciously choosing the one that best matches the feeling, the context, and the exact nuance you want to convey.
And using this variety is what makes you sound less repetitive, more precise, and just more interesting to listen to, right?
Absolutely. And it signals different things to your listener about how you're positioning your statement. The best way to really get these down, honestly, just try them out. Maybe swap out "I think" for one of these a couple of times today. See how it feels.
Good advice. Okay, so that's getting our own opinions out there. But conversations aren't monologues, right? This is where it gets really interesting for me. What about when someone else says something and you're just nodding along thinking, yes, exactly? How do you agree in a way that sounds genuine and enthusiastic and actually adds something? Because sometimes just saying I agree feels a bit flat.
Yeah, it can feel a bit weak, can't it? Agreement is so important for building rapport, showing you're listening actively. And while I agree works, the source material we looked at really emphasizes how using different phrases for agreement can seriously boost the conversation. Well, you can show different levels of agreement, for one thing. You can also really validate what the other person said, make them feel heard. And often, a good agreement phrase can be a springboard to add your own related thought or experience. It just makes the whole exchange more dynamic.
Okay, I'm sold. Give us the good stuff. What are these great ways to agree naturally that the source suggests?
All right, here are some really common and useful ones. I completely agree with you.
Strong.
That's a great point.
Acknowledging.
I couldn't agree more.
Very strong.
You're absolutely right.
Confirming.
Exactly, that's what I was thinking.
The mind meld one. Okay, let's break these down. I completely agree, and I couldn't agree more. They both sound really strong. Is there a difference in when you'd use them?
They both signal, yeah, 100% agreement, no reservations. I completely agree with you. Is very clear, very direct. Solid, polite, leaves no doubt. Good in most situations, even slightly more formal ones. Someone says, we need to double check these figures. You say, I completely agree with you. Strong, clear affirmation.
Got it.
I couldn't agree more. Is often even more emphatic. It feels a bit more enthusiastic, maybe slightly more informal or used when there's more passion involved. It's that idiom meaning it's impossible to agree more than I do right now.
Right, maximum agreement.
Exactly. It signals total alignment, often sounds really natural and heartfelt. Your friend says, this pizza is incredible. You go, oh, I couldn't agree more. Best I've had in ages. It just has a bit more energy.
So, completely agree. Solid, clear strength. Couldn't agree more. Maximum strength with maybe more feeling or enthusiasm.
That's a perfect summary. Couldn't agree more often carries a bit more emotion.
Okay, now, you're absolutely right. Versus, that's a great point.
Yeah.
How do these two compare? They feel slightly different.
They are, and they're both excellent for validating the other person, just in slightly different ways. You're absolutely right. Directly confirms that what they said is correct, accurate, true. You're essentially saying your statement is factual. It's powerful validation. Someone states the deadline is Friday. You say you're absolutely right. It confirms the fact.
Okay, confirms correctness.
Whereas, that's a great point, focuses more on the quality or value of their contribution. The idea, the observation, the argument itself. You're complimenting their insightfulness.
Ah, so it's less about factual correctness and more about the value of the idea.
Exactly. This is brilliant when someone offers something insightful, maybe a perspective you hadn't considered. That's a great point about how the marketing campaign might be unechoing morale. You're saying that's a valuable observation to bring into the discussion. You might even use it if you don't fully agree with their ultimate conclusion,
Right.
but you recognize the point they raised is important and valid.
That's a really useful distinction. You're right. Validates the truth. Great point. Validates the insight or idea. I like that.
And saying that's a great point often naturally leads to adding more. That's a great point, and it makes me think about...
Nice. Okay, and the last one. Exactly. That's what I was thinking. This feels really collaborative, like you said.
It really does. Exactly. On its own is a strong, punchy agreement. Adding, that's what I was thinking, takes it further. It shows you weren't just listening and agreeing, you were actually having the same thought.
Right. Creates that feeling of being on the same wavelength.
Totally. It builds a strong connection. It's perfect when someone voices exactly what was on the tip of your tongue. Makes the other person feel really understood.
Let's try that example from the source. Exercise is really important for mental health. How do these phrases make the agreement better than just, yeah, I agree?
Okay, so yeah, I agree. It's okay. But compare it. If you say, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. Exercise helps reduce stress and keeps you energized. See? You validate their truth. Absolutely right. And then immediately add supporting reasons. Helps reduce stress. Your agreement suddenly has substance.
Right. You're adding value.
Exactly. Or use, that's a great point. That's a great point. I always feel better after a workout. Here, you praise their insight. Great point. And then make it personal and relatable with your own experience. It brings the idea to life.
Connects it to real life. Yeah.
What about, I couldn't agree more. Maybe the statement was, getting enough sleep is just as crucial as exercise. You say, oh, I couldn't agree more. Sleep is just as important as exercise. That massive emphasis shows your strong conviction on the equal importance.
Really drives the point home.
And finally, exactly, that's what I was thinking. Maybe someone says, we really need more team lunches to build connection. You respond, exactly. That's what I was thinking. It feels like we barely know each other outside of project work these days. You show immediate, identical thought and then expand on the shared reasoning.
Wow. Okay, it's crystal clear. These aren't just synonyms for yes. They let you show how much you agree, validate the other person, add your own perspective or evidence, and just build a much stronger connection. It's active participation, not just passive listening.
You've nailed it. They transform agreement from just nodding along to actually contributing meaningfully to the flow and feeling of the conversation. Makes you sound much more engaged.
Right. Now, brace ourselves.
Yeah.
The bit that makes a lot of people nervous. Disagreeing. How on earth do you say, nope, I don't think so, without sounding like you're picking a fight or being rude or just making things awkward? Because a blunt, I disagree, can really kill the mood, can't it?
It really can. And this raises such an important point. Look, disagreement is normal. It's healthy even. Good discussions often involve different viewpoints bumping up against each other. That's how ideas get better.
True.
But how you disagree, that's absolutely critical. The language you choose makes the difference between a constructive exchange and an argument. And the source materials gives us some excellent tools specifically designed to soften disagreement, keep things polite, and keep the conversation going.
Okay, so politeness is the name of the game.
Yeah.
Keeping the door open for more discussion, not slamming it shut. What are the magic phrases the source recommends for this delicate operation?
Yeah, politeness is key. And the phrases offered all kind of share this core strategy, this polite structure. Here we are. I see your point, but...
Okay, acknowledge then counter.
I get what you're saying, but I feel differently.
Similar structure.
That's an interesting perspective, but I think...
Validate, then counter.
I respect your opinion, but I have a different view.
Explicit respect.
And I get where you're coming from, but I see it differently.
Empathy first. Okay, I'm seeing that pattern you mentioned. Acknowledge or validate before the but. Why is starting like that so effective?
It's incredibly powerful psychologically. When you start with, I see your point, or I get what you're saying, or even, that's interesting, you're sending a clear signal. I heard you. I understood you. I'm acknowledging the validity of your thought process or your right to have that view.
Right. It shows you're not just dismissing them out of hand.
Exactly. That little bit of validation up front makes the but that follows feel much less aggressive. It shows you've actually engaged with their idea, not just waited for your turn to shoot it down. It massively reduces the chance they'll get defensive or feel personally attacked.
So it's about disagreeing with the idea respectfully, rather than making it feel like an attack on the person. Keeps the conversation constructive.
You got it. Preserves the relationship, keeps the dialogue open. So let's look at the specific phrases. I see your point, but. This is probably the most common, most standard, polite disagreement formula. I see your point. Clearly states you understand their argument or rationale. The but then gently introduces your contrasting idea. It works in loads of situations, fairly neutral formality.
And that social media example fits right in here. Someone says social media is just bad. And said, no, it's not, you say. I see your point, but I think social media also has benefits, like connecting people.
Perfect. You acknowledge their concern. I see your point about the bad stuff. Then you introduce the other side, but benefits like connecting people. You avoid that head-on collision.
Okay, makes sense. What about, I get what you're saying, but I feel differently. How's that different?
I get what you're saying is very similar to I see your point. Maybe sounds a touch more informal, more conversational. It means I understand you. The second part, but I feel differently, is quite interesting. It frames your disagreement more as a personal feeling or response rather than a purely logical argument against theirs.
So it softens it by making it about your feeling.
Yeah, potentially. It's like saying, okay, I understand the logic you presented, but my gut feeling or my personal take leads me somewhere else. It can feel less like a direct challenge to their reasoning.
Okay, interesting nuance. Next up. That's an interesting perspective, but
This one is fantastic when someone offers a view that's maybe a bit unusual or creative or something you genuinely hadn't considered before. Calling it an interesting perspective is a genuine compliment. It validates their unique way of thinking before you offer your own, perhaps more conventional or different analysis.
So it really values their contribution even as you're about to disagree.
Precisely. It says, wow, cool way of looking at it, which is very respectful. Then you follow with your view. Like, if someone gives a really unconventional reason for a market trend, you could say, that's an interesting perspective, but I actually think the underlying economic shifts are probably the main driver here.
Nice. It validates and redirects.
Yeah.
The source example. Social media is bad response. That's an interesting perspective, but I actually think it depends on how people use it. Validates their take as interesting before offering the "it depends" counter-argument.
Exactly. It's a really smooth way to handle differing interpretations.
Okay. How about, "I respect your opinion, but I have a different view." This feels very polite and direct.
It is. It's very explicit about the respect. This is especially useful when the topic is sensitive, highly subjective, or maybe in a more formal context where showing respect is really paramount.
Right.
By literally saying, I respect your opinion, you lay down a clear foundation of politeness. You accept their right to hold that view. Then, but I have a different view, it's just a calm statement of fact. Your view differs. It doesn't necessarily explain why immediately, but it prioritizes maintaining that respectful tone.
Seems like a really good choice if you want to state your disagreement clearly. But the main goal is just to avoid any offense, maybe with someone senior or on a touchy subject.
Absolutely. It's a very safe, very clear, very respectful way to signal disagreement without generating conflict.
Okay. And the last one. "I get where you're coming from, but I see it differently."
I get where you're coming from, another great idiom. It suggests a deeper level of understanding than just, I see your point. It implies you understand the background, the reasons, the motivation that led them to their conclusion. It shows empathy for their position.
Right. Understanding the journey to their opinion.
Exactly. And then, but I see it differently is a very common, gentle way to state your disagreement. It implies you've looked at the same situation or evidence, but your interpretation is just different. Not necessarily better or worse, just different. Less of a direct fight, more of a differing perception.
So, I understand the factors that make you feel that way, but when I look at it, my interpretation is this.
Precisely. It's empathetic upfront. Maybe a colleague is really frustrated about a new process. You could say, look, I totally get where you're coming from. It's definitely more work initially, but I actually see it differently. I think long term, it's going to save us a lot of time. You acknowledge their feeling, frustration, more work, before offering your different perspective, long-term benefit.
These are all so much more nuanced and constructive than just "I disagree" or "you're wrong." That common thread of acknowledging first really seems to be the magic ingredient.
It truly is. Mastering these phrases allows you to engage in healthy debate, give constructive feedback, share alternative ideas, all crucial communication skills without burning bridges or shutting people down. It's about being clear about your own view while staying respectful of others.
Okay, amazing. We've covered the core mechanics: stating your opinion, agreeing constructively, disagreeing politely. Now, how do we add that sparkle? How do we move from sounding just correct to sounding like us? Adding personality, making it engaging.
Exactly, because just knowing the rules isn't the whole story, is it? True fluency, that natural sound, comes from letting your own voice shine through. And the source material touches on this. Adding personality is key to sounding authentic and actually connecting with people.
Right. Native speakers don't just talk like textbooks.
Not at all. We use little let-in phrases, our tone of voice, sometimes humor, all sorts of things to color what we say.
So what does the source suggest for injecting some of that personality? What are these little linguistic flourishes?
Yeah. Well, it highlights using certain introductory expressions that add a specific flavor or context. Things like, honestly, I think.
Okay.
To be fair, I'd say.
Balancing act.
And if you ask me.
Casual take. Let's break those down. Starting with honestly, I think. What does that little honestly do?
Adding honestly signals, well, honesty, sincerity, candor. It suggests you're sharing your genuine thought, maybe something a little direct or something you feel strongly about and want to present truthfully.
Right, like you're giving your straight opinion.
Yeah. Sometimes it prefaces an opinion that might be slightly unpopular or just one you want to emphasize is your real feeling. Honestly, I think we should have gone with the other option, or that source example. Honestly, I think learning English is one of the best investments in yourself. That honestly just makes it feel more personal, more heartfelt.
Okay, add sincerity. Got it. How about to be fair, I'd say?
Yeah. To be fair is all about balance. You usually use it to introduce a point that acknowledges the other side, or maybe a positive aspect after something negative has been said, or vice versa. It signals you're trying to be objective, looking at the whole picture.
So if people are complaining about a difficult project, you might say, yeah, it's been tough, but to be fair, I'd say we've learned a huge amount from it.
Perfect example. You acknowledge the negative, tough, but then use to be fair to introduce the balancing positive, learned a huge amount. Shows you're considering multiple angles being reasonable.
Nice. And if you ask me...
If you ask me is super common, very casual. You use it to clearly flag that what follows is your personal opinion, especially if it's subjective, maybe a bit strong, or even slightly controversial in a lighthearted way. It kind of playfully acknowledges that others might disagree.
Right, less formal than, in my opinion.
Definitely. Great for preferences, opinions on movies, food, that kind of thing. The source example is spot on. If you ask me, coffee is better than tea any day.
Totally subjective preference.
Exactly. Using "if you ask me" frames it clearly as your take. It adds personality, sounds informal, and can even invite a bit of fun debate. You wouldn't use it for recommending a serious business strategy, but for saying, if you ask me, that movie was way too long, it's perfect.
Adds that personal flavor.
Yep.
Okay, so those intro phrases help. The source also mentioned using emotion or humor. How does that work? Like, how does humor make an opinion more engaging?
Humor and emotion are what make us sound human, right? Relatable, memorable. They show how you feel, not just what you think. And those two examples from the source are brilliant illustrations. I'd say pineapple on pizza is a crime, but that's just me.
Huh. Okay, the hyperbole there, calling it a crime, that's obvious exaggeration.
That's the key. The over-the-top exaggeration is the humor. It's a funny way to express really strong dislike about something that's ultimately trivial, the great pineapple on pizza debate.
Right.
It signals you're not actually serious about the crime part, but you are serious about your dislike. And then adding, but that's just me, is crucial. It's self-deprecating, acknowledges your opinion isn't fact, makes it even funnier and less aggressive. A really common, lighthearted way to state a strong preference.
It lets you be dramatic without being genuinely offensive. Performing your opinion, kind of?
Yes, exactly. And that other example. Honestly, I'd rather wake up at 5 a.m. than sit in traffic for 2 hours.
This one works because, nobody likes either of those things.
Precisely. You take two universally disliked things and compare them to show the extreme level of your hatred for one of them, the traffic. That I'd rather do X than Y. Structure is classic for expressing strong preference, and using relatable annoyances makes it vivid and funny.
And that honestly adds that touch of genuine feeling again.
Exactly. It reinforces that this is your true, deep-seated hatred of traffic jams. It makes the opinions stick. Makes you sound like a real person with real feeling.
So sounding engaging isn't just about fancy vocabulary. It's about using these little phrases, using tone, maybe some humor, relatable stuff. Making your opinions feel alive and authentic. Less like a robot, more like a real human.
Couldn't have said it better myself. It's moving past just being grammatically correct to actually being conversationally fluent and expressing your unique self. Makes you sound less like you're translating word for word in your head.
Wow, okay. We have seriously covered a lot of ground today. What a deep dive. We started with getting your own opinion out there confidently and with nuance.
Moving beyond, I think.
Yeah. Then we looked at how to agree enthusiastically and constructively, really building connection.
Not just saying yes.
Then we tackled the big one, disagreeing politely, keeping things respectful.
Using those acknowledgement phrases.
Ugh.
Crucial.
And finally, how to sprinkle in that personality using humor and those little introductory phrases to make it all sound engaging and, well, real.
And what's really striking, isn't it, is how these small shifts in language can make such a huge difference in how you're perceived. Going from maybe sounding a bit hesitant or blunt to sounding confident, thoughtful, polite, genuinely interesting to talk to.
Yeah. They're not just phrases to memorize, are they? They're like tools for better communication, better connections.
Exactly. They're tools for navigating the social landscape of conversation in English.
Okay, let's do a super quick recap of the key takeaways from the source material, just to lock these ideas in. For giving your opinion, remember there's life beyond, I think, try, in my opinion, the solid standard.
Personally, I believe, for that stronger conviction.
From my perspective, linking it to your unique view.
I'd say that. More casual, observational.
And, as far as I'm concerned, focusing on your personal stake or priorities.
And for agreeing, step up from just, I agree. Use things like, I completely agree with you. Clear, total agreement.
I couldn't agree more. Maximum enthusiasm.
You're absolutely right, validating their truth.
That's a great point. Complimenting their insight.
Exactly. That's what I was thinking, for that lovely mind-meld connection.
And then, for that essential skill, disagreeing politely, always remember, Acknowledge first. Ditch the blunt, I disagree, and try, I see your point, but the standard polite way.
I get what you're saying, but I feel differently, framing it as personal feeling.
That's an interesting perspective.
Yeah.
But I think valuing their unique view first.
I respect your opinion, but I have a different view. Prioritizing explicit respect.
And I get where you're coming from, but I see it differently. Showing empathy before differing.
And finally, injecting personality. Use those flavor-adding intros, honestly, I think, for sincerity.
To be fair, I'd say, for balance.
If you ask me, for that casual, personal take. And definitely play with humor, exaggeration, relatable emotions, the pineapple crime, the traffic versus early mornings, make it memorable.
Just consciously trying to weave even a few of these into your conversations will make a noticeable difference, won't it? You'll likely feel more confident, and your interactions will probably feel more dynamic.
Absolutely. And the source guide really hammers this home. Mastery comes from actually doing it. Practice. Find chances to use these phrases. Talk about a movie, an article, join in a discussion at work or with friends. Pick one or two phrases that stuck with you today and actively try to use them.
And then this is important, actually. Think about it afterwards. How did you feel? Did it sound okay? How did the other person react? Which ones still feel a bit awkward? That cycle of try, reflect, adjust is how they become second nature.
And you can also tune your ear. Listen for these phrases when you're watching English movies, listening to podcasts, whatever. Hearing native speakers use them naturally in context really helps cement them in your mind and makes you feel more comfortable using them yourself.
That passive listening definitely helps the active practice. Okay, so this feels like a really solid foundation for expressing ourselves. Now, the source material hints at where we might go next. Another really crucial skill for connecting with people. Sharing experiences.
Yeah, the next logical step it introduces is storytelling in English. Once you're comfortable sharing what you think and navigating agreement and disagreement, the next level of connection often comes from sharing what's happened to you. Telling anecdotes, recounting events.
Oh, that's huge, isn't it? Just telling someone about your day or a funny thing that happened or explaining something you witnessed. It's fundamental to conversation, but it uses different muscles than just giving opinions.
It really does. Storytelling brings in things like narrative flow, how you order events, set the scene, maybe build a little suspense. And crucially, it involves using past tenses correctly and smoothly, which, let's be honest, can be a challenge for many learners.
Definitely. Getting those past tenses right consistently.
Yeah. So it's about guiding your listener through an experience, making it clear, making it engaging, holding their interest.
Sounds like that could be our next deep dive then. Getting into the art of telling simple stories effectively in English, making them easy to follow and hopefully interesting.
I think so. We can look at how the source suggests structuring a basic narrative, getting more comfortable with those past tenses without getting tangled up, and adding those little details that make a story come alive.
Okay, but this raises an interesting question for me. How does mastering today's topic, expressing opinions, agreeing, disagreeing, actually set you up for storytelling? Are they connected?
That's a great question, I think. Perhaps it's all about finding and developing your voice in English. Expressing opinions forces you to articulate your thoughts, your feelings. Storytelling forces you to articulate your experiences, your observations.
Ah, okay. Both are about authentic self-expression.
Exactly. They exercise different linguistic muscles. Maybe opinions might be more about logic and stance, stories more about sequence and description, but both contribute to your overall ability to communicate who you are, what you think, and what you've lived through in English.
I like that. It's not just learning grammar rules in isolation. It's building the ability to share yourself. Opinions are the what I think muscle. Stories are the what happened to me muscle.
Well put. It's all about empowering you to participate fully, to connect genuinely, and to share your unique perspective and life experiences with others in English.
Well, listener, you definitely have a fantastic new set of tools to play with after today. Our challenge to you, pick just one or two phrases from each section, opinions, agreeing, disagreeing, adding personality, and consciously try them out in your next English conversation. See how they feel.
And don't worry about perfection. Just trying is the most important step. Remember, your voice, your opinions, your experiences, they matter. And now you have even more ways to share them effectively, politely, and in a way that truly sounds like you.
Absolutely. Keep practicing, keep talking, keep finding your voice. We'll be back next time to dive into a wonderful world of storytelling in English. Until then, happy chatting.
Bye for now.